Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. On tonight's episode, I'm going to be talking with a special friend of mine, Rober Jerome Pagan, who's the one of the directors at Workshop 44 here in Los Banos. It's a nonprofit organization that puts on media production, etc. And he's going to be talking to us about an upcoming that's here locally in Los Banos, and we're going to talk about it and get into all the details in just a moment, right after a brief message from our sponsor. Have you been thinking about going solar? You know it's a good investment, but maybe you're that guy who's been diligently doing his homework, tirelessly searching the internet for the best possible deal and the best possible time to go solar. Well, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't wait any longer. I'm sure you've heard the classic saying that time is money, but that couldn't be any more true than now. And you see, the reason isn't just because the fact that you're missing out on savings. The reason also has to do with the federal government. And the reason is the federal solar tax credit. In 2019, it was worth 30%. Right now, it's 26% because Congress extended it through 2022. But in 2023, it'll be gone. Recently, the city of Los Banos has partnered with Pacific Clean Energy, meaning that we'll get more rebates for switching to electrical appliances and more money per kilowatt hour for our solar panels. You can't afford to wait any longer. So do yourself a favor and take out your phone and call Superior Solar at 866-589-5626. That's 866-589-5626. Or visit them at superiorSolarInc.com. Superior Solar, power up with the sun. And we're back. Thanks for watching. So once again, folks, I'm here and I have Rober Jerome Pagan with me, who's the director of Workshop 44, and he's going to tell us about his upcoming new mini-series. So, Robert, go ahead and take it away. Tell us a little bit about this.
So, hello. Thank you for having me, Justin. It's always good to be on your show. Thank you for doing this for the community as well. Last Gasp is a part of Workshop 44, and it's also part of Forsaken Olive Media, which is also based in Los Banos. So it's two companies, a nonprofit and a media production company, that we've joined forces to create an LGBTQ BIPOC mini-series that is focused on a Puerto Rican theatrical director set in the early thousands who is gay, and his friends and his life growing up in kind of small town California and visiting San Francisco and kind of discovering himself and what it means to be a gay man in the early thousands as he discovers what that is for himself. And actually, we have a trailer that we just released this week that I would love for you guys to watch. So I know that Justin will cue that up for you.
Great, yeah, so let's go ahead and take a watch.
Family isn't just blood. It's so much more than that.
You said you'd try to keep my best interests in mind, that we wouldn't hit rewind and go
Damien
back in time.
is more than a friend.
Okay, fuckers, this is it. The only thing that matters is the story, right? Keep me honest.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Colton, and I'll be auditioning for the role of Ben in the one-act The Last Gasp. I wanted to tell you that I would like to withdraw my submission.
Who says you're getting the part anyway? Plus, I don't see us doing that again.
Why? You forget to bring Ben's jacket?
What do you want me to say? That I'm willing to throw my whole life into your hands just because you say you care about me? That's crazy.
Go kill yourself.
And just when you think you're secure, the ground begins to shake.
How's the trip, Damien? Bang!
It wasn't me. You were a coward.
Steady tiptoeing round our problems. Steady tiptoeing round our problems.
I don't know.
What happened next, Damien?
is this filmed here in Los Banos or near area or?
So yes, actually, a good portion, I would say about 35% of the show is filmed here in Los Banos, in various locations, different houses, stuff like that, private venues. But almost, actually, 90% of the TV show is filmed either in Merced County or here in the Central Valley. So we do also film up in Merced at the MAC. We film in Stockton. We filmed up in the foothills, but a primary footage is filmed here in Los Banos. And we have actors from not all from the Central Valley, but all over the nation. And so it's kind of crazy to be able to bring Harvard grads, LA citizens, actors from San Francisco, actors from Ohio into the Central Valley and show the pride that we have for this area. So I think that one of the major things for our project as Workshop 44 being a nonprofit for Merced County was that we wanted to be able to show that you don't need to go to San Francisco or LA or Vegas or New York to create quality content and to tell quality stories. We could do it in our home. And a lot of people really have taken on to that. And I think with COVID, that kind of forced a lot of us theater people to really reevaluate how we continue to tell stories. For example, this entire miniseries started off as it was going to be a Zoom table read where people would Zoom in and just hear the script. And from that, it grew into what it is today, a passion project, which will be produced. It's 4K, filmed with 6K cameras, 4 or 5 different cameras, drone shots. It's Netflix quality television that is being created right here, but also being created by LGBT BIPOC people ourselves. It's one of the few shows in the area, and probably one of the few organizations. For example, Forsaken Olive Media is 90% LGBTQ owned. 90% of our board is from the LGBTQ community. The last Gasp cast is almost 45% BIPOC, with an artistic staff of a majority BIPOC. Our editors are 2 Latina female women, two Latina women who are phenomenal. And our DP is a gay man who's married, and our sound guy is his husband. And my husband is the executive producer. So it's very close, but it's also very representation. We wanted to show the representation and make sure that the film itself was being produced by the people that the stories mattered to. And it really matters a lot to me as a gay man who grew up in the Bay Area and was able to move to the Central Valley when I got older. I've been here 8 years now. And when I first got here, it's interesting to see the change in our community and the openness and the opening up and being able to evolve as a community to love humans for just being humans. And I think that we don't have enough of those programs in our community, or enough representation of gay men or gay women or trans men and women in our community that have a positive outlook. And so I wanted to be able to show that even if you feel like you're alone and you're in a small town, or if you feel like you're in a place where you're not being represented, you can yourself bring that out. And that is exactly what Last Gasp has done. And it's been a learning process for a film person. I've told this to people 100 times. I am a theater guy. I write plays, I direct plays, I stage live theater. And over this last year, I had to break out of my comfort zone and learn something new. And it's probably been the most rewarding thing I've done since I've turned 30. So it's one of those, get out there and just kind of breathe your passion. A key point, not only in Last Gasp, but also Workshop 44, is that we believe that every human story has the right to be told. And unfortunately, the minority groups tend not to have the means or the ability to have their stories told, because film, television, theater, arts, entertainment, as you know, you create media yourself. It's not easy and it's not cheap. And so we have the ability to help that minority group. And I mean, we have AAIP, there's just so much representation in this show that it's almost just a celebration of humanity in its rawest form. But I mean, the other cool thing about the show is the show's about growth. It's about showing that you don't always do the right things. It's like our main character, Damien, he suffers from drug addiction, depression, anxiety, dealing with his boyfriend in the TV show commits suicide. What does that do to a person who, you know, loves someone so deeply, who takes their life because they can't even be themselves because they're scared of what their family thinks of their sexuality or who they are within their heart. And it deals with what one of the characters is a woman who gets pregnant at 20, 21. And it's, what do you do with your opinion, what your life is, what your choices are, and how do you balance that with society's choices? Especially in the early thousands, the show takes place around 2000, 2008. And if you look at that time period in California, there were three major things going on. You had Prop 8, which was to ban gay marriage. You had a proposition trying to have children under the 18 get forced to have parental consent for abortions. And you had a bunch of segregation laws trying to happen in California, which it was an interesting time of, you had this feeling like you could be proudful, but the laws were not necessarily representing what you were feeling inside your heart. And I think that Last Gasp really touches those moments and that time period of political and which is interesting because now we're almost 15 years later and we're in a whole different type of political climate where we're having these discussions again. What does it mean to be a brown gay man? What does it mean to be a brown man? What does it mean to be a minority in our world? What does it mean to be someone who does not have the equal right to a cisgendered white person? And I think that those are some interesting topics that are hard to face. We don't usually like to talk about them, but when you're able to see them in such a natural way where you see what microaggressiveness does to humans, because all of these characters are suffering from microaggression, including the white characters. The white fragility of characters is very seen in this show. They're questioning of, and I mean, even like our lead character, he's Puerto Rican, but he's light skinned. So what does that mean for him where he's white passing and a lot of his friends are getting followed by security guards in Kmart? So it's just really a dichotomy of what the early thousands was.
And you know, it's interesting. I mean, when we think about history, some people argue that history is serves as, or at least the written portion of history serves as our memory, and that is part. It is society's memory, but it's also how we contextualize the present. And one of the things that's interesting that you brought up is so many people forget, especially those growing up today, that gay marriage was illegal really not long ago, like really, really not long ago. People forget that we were having these discussions and such, and there was a time where it was actually a crime. Very, very short time ago in my lifetime. When I enlisted in the military, I had to sign and stand in front of a recruiter and tell him I'm not gay, and I had to sign a thing saying don't ask, don't tell. And they literally set me down at a desk at one part at MEPS and had me basically say, look, if you're gay, it's fine. You just can't act on any of it. You can't actually which was strange. And I mean, it's a weird policy when we really think about it. You know, and people almost go, well, that sounds ridiculous. Why would they do that? Well, that really was how it was. And that we're only talking like 10 years ago. So it's It is interesting that when you think about it, I mean, things are changing, they're progressing, but this is the first year in America we've ever had Gay Pride Month. Literally, the first year ever. And that's a big part of why, I wanted to have you on, because this show that you're doing is LGBTQ themed. It is the plot, the characters, and the individuals in it and behind it are members of the community as well, but the actual substance of it is themed in that way. And then also I like the fact that it is local. It is in Los Banos. So I felt, we don't have a parade. We didn't raise a flag. We didn't do a declaration, really didn't do anything for it. So to me, it was kind of difficult to find something in our community for people who are members of that community, so they could feel like, there's other people like me too here, and I'm represented, and here's what, people within my community are doing. And so I thought it was a good idea to kind of put this out there and let people know that actually we do have an active LGBTQ community within the town, doing things. And I think it's also cool to talk about our economy too, in the sense that, look, there's up and coming media companies. I'm a media company. That's what my business is. You're partnering with a media company, and then you're a nonprofit, and I'm hearing there's others coming up. And it's interesting how technology is making it more affordable for entrepreneurs to do this. And Los Banos being a place with a lot of wilderness, diverse kind of scenery, and then the Central Valley, and then it being kind of fairly cheap and affordable to live here, actually kind of makes it almost easier in some ways to do some of the filming than perhaps it would be like LA,
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are two things that you said that I thought were really good, but I wanted to. You said that we don't. It's hard. It was hard for you to find stuff with LGBTQ in Los Banos, and I want to say, if it was hard for you, it's even harder for that teenager who's in high school who's scared to come out. And that's why I think it's very important that you do things like this. So thank you for that. But I also think one of the things you mentioned is, unfortunately, our town didn't do a declaration. We didn't raise a flag. And yes, I know that we're evolving and there's going to be progress, but I do want to celebrate our county who did. Like Merced County in itself, our seed town, Merced, did raise a flag. The Arts Council, the MAC, has a wonderful exhibit, an art exhibit called What is Queer, or Who is Queer? And it's a bunch of local artists from Los Banos, Merced, from our county, who have put together artwork. And there's a wonderful drag exhibit on how they do their makeup, their dresses, their crowns, beautiful paintings. And I think that though we have a small LGBT out and proud community in our county, it is growing, and stuff like this is what helps it continue to grow. So thank you for doing that. One of the major things about our show is we do talk about history in it. The characters are very educated. They come from, the hills or the Livermore Pleasanton area. And so these BIPOC people grew up in white affluential neighborhoods. So they're very smart, and they know a lot of history. So they talk in references. For example, we mentioned one of the characters, Damien, actually the lead character, says that he's tired of dating guys with the Twinkie defense. Well, a lot of people don't know what that is, but the Twinkie defense is literally what was used to justify killing Harvey Milk, and things like that. And so we slip in a little bit of our history through this to really engage people. And the other thing that we point out is, though this is taking place in 2007, 2008, the TV show, at that time, there was no minority gay representation on television. Every gay character was white. So when I was growing up, I didn't get the chance to see people who looked like me and who loved like me on television playing characters. It was only acceptable in the eyes of myself watching through TV to see white gay men or white lesbian women. And I look at the television shows that we had at the time, Will and Grace, Queer as Folk, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. Like, if you look at television like that, they were filtered and centered on white gay men, versus what we're dealing with in our show is a layer that really has never been truly discussed, because it's up until this last year, our community has been just as prejudiced as every other community. And I think that that's also something that, as a gay man and as a gay community, we need to address within ourselves. Is how can a minority group itself be so oppressive of its people inside its minority group? And I think that that's another important thing that we never really talk about. And I think maybe people are so scared to say, well, I know a lot of brown guys who are very racist. And racism doesn't stop at your skin color, and prejudice doesn't stop at your sexual orientation. And I think that that's something that people are very scared to say, because they think that if we say that, then all of a sudden we're going against the grain. But no, the truth of it is, the gay community has not been very open to the minority community inside of our own communities. We had issues with, there's years and years of trying to keep the trans community out of the LGB at that point in time movement. So there was so much of that stuff going on in history, and we really do touch on that. And we don't shy away from the language and the things that were said and the hateful atmosphere that we had within our own community. And I think that that's kind of important too, because we tend to, especially over the last year, we tend to kind of focus on our white cis communities being the prejudice or the racist communities, without really justifying our own selves in what our errors have been. And I think that that's the beauty as well of Last Gasp. Is I always tell people, it's the ugly with inside the beauty. The show looks beautiful, you have an emotional response, but some aspects are really ugly. They're things that we've evolved and learned from. And unfortunately, the younger generation, the kids younger than millennials, tend to kind of forget that even me as a millennial, I was gay bashed in high school. I wasn't allowed to, I married my husband the day before the election so that I could be grandfathered in. I've experienced prejudice, and I've walked the activist life to make sure that a lot of these younger generations have the freedoms they do, just like Harvey Milk and the people before me did their process through the activism. And I think that art is activism, media can change, and I think that that's what's very important with Last Gasp as well.
Well, I mean, even in terms, on a local level, we had in recent years, I want to say this was like 2 years ago, maybe 3, but we actually had our school board trying to actually block books donated from the Gay Straight Alliance because it featured 2 daddy penguins and like a baby penguin, I think. And then I think it was another book. But the point I'm making is that's here and now. That's not like we act like it's something in the past, but actually we have elected officials right now that are adamantly anti LGBTQ. We have that right now. I'm literally sitting in office as we speak. I can recall from my childhood, I can recall people making fun of people who they believed were gay. And then even if somebody wasn't actually gay, they would use gay as like an insult to someone they thought was like unmasculine or feminine or something like that. And then we would play games, called things like Smear the Queer and stuff. And I remember a parent getting really mad about that one time because she had I think it was like a brother that was gay. And a lot of us didn't really see the harm in it. We didn't see a big deal in it. And keep in mind, I'm like 9 years old. And we didn't really get it. And as you get older, you think back to, and you think about it, and you're like, well, think about how all these little things add up. And if somebody really is that way, they're growing up feeling like they're like less than human, that it's acceptable to treat them this way, that they're less than. and those little, like you talked about, microaggressions, which is basically what those are. And it really adds up and builds up. And I think something you talked to me about one time in a conversation we had was just, you think to yourself, well, what would that, gay kid in high school or whatever who's alone and afraid, what would he think? And looking out. And I imagine maybe that comes from your personal experience, but it's also caused me to think about that too, in light of recent like school board activity, and thinking about like stuff like your show and the impact it might have positively on someone. But I think about that too. I think about there's people who I've had friends and then later on find out they're at some point they come out, and I had no idea their entire life. And then you'd almost think to yourself going back, you're like, did we make him feel like he could even come out? Were we exclusive? Did we, use micro? So I guess what I'm saying is that we have to change as a culture in general, and just change in general. But you're right in that 2008, in the early 2000s, and even still today, really, a lot of this is really new, and you're really watching the LGBTQ movement unfold right now. You're living that history. It's kind of like if you lived in the 60s and you watched the civil rights movement, you're watching the LGBTQ movement now. It's been, I would say it started, like 20, 30 years ago, and it's still unfolding now.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is one of the most influential men in the civil rights movement was gay, and he worked with Martin Luther King, and unfortunately they pushed him out of a lot of the events. And I'm trying to remember his name. I just watched a great documentary about him. But like there's a lot of parallels with the civil rights movement and with the LGBTQ movement, more or less because of the idea of being the oppressed and understanding what it means to be less than from the societal norm. But I would almost argue there's a new joint civil rights movement happening right now, where people of color and other minority groups like the LGBT groups, we're noticing that you have to be complicit with each other to gain in a bigger way. So last year, for example, every June we have an unofficial kind of gay pride month, and certain cities do certain things, and San Francisco does gay pride, and they do the Stonewall marches and things like that. But last year, all those things got suspended, not only because of COVID, but also to focus on our brown and black and indigenous people of color. And so a lot of those LGBTQ events then transformed and skewed to talk about civil rights and talk about our oppressed BIPOC and just our oppressed BIPOC population. And I think that is something that we have learned to get better in our 20 years of our huge movement.
Before we conclude this, real quick, could you tell me where we can watch The Last Gasp?
So yeah, we haven't released episodes yet, but you can. We're doing a lot of back BTS stuff. We have a lot of trailers. We're gonna finish filming all 8 episodes first before we start releasing. We're going to be finished filming all 8 episodes by the end of August, which will be very exciting. But you can find us on Instagram at lastgasp_gasp_, or on Facebook just as Last Gasp. And then we also have a very cool opportunity. We have a couple opportunities coming up. We're going to be looking for extras. And so on June 29th, we're shooting in Stockton. We're looking for extras. But the first week of August, we're going to be looking for extras for shoots both in Los Banos and in Merced. So if you want to be an extra on this television show, reach out to those pages or email casting@workshop44.com.
Very good. And thank you so much for coming on the show. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe to Los Banos Talk. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, losbanostalk.com. You can become a supporter of Los Banos Talk for just $4.99 a month and gain access to all the videos first and ad-free, plus gain access to bonus behind-the-scenes content and opinion pieces as well. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.